Hi, everyone. Welcome to our presentation. We are going to be discussing teen dating violence today, and it is by Sierra, Abby, Corey, and Carmen. And then what we're going to be going over today is general information, why this issue is important, some assessments to look for, youth considerations, parent and guardian considerations, and cultural considerations. And then just so everyone is aware, we are going to be discussing topics such as sexual abuse, physical abuse, perpetrators, and I want everyone to be able to take time for yourself. And if that means stepping away and coming back at another time to view this, please do so because it is being recorded, and I hope you guys enjoy. Okay, so what is teen dating violence? Teen dating violence can include physical, psychological, or sexual abuse. It can also include harassment or stalking of any person from the ages of 12 to 18 in the context of a past or present romantic consensual relationship. It can include things such as physical abuse, which is hitting, biting, shoving, hair pulling, or scratching. It can include emotional or psychological abuse, which is name calling, bullying, shaming, which can be intentional embarrassing or constant monitoring of the individual. Sexual abuse, which is forcing a teen partner to engage in a sexual act which is against or without their consent. Stalking, which is repeatedly following or harassing a teen partner in a way that causes them reasonable fear for their safety or well-being. And then some statistics is 1 in 3 teenagers experience teen dating violence. Nearly 1.5 million that are in a romantic relationship admitted to being in an unhealthy relationship. 25% of teenage girls are estimated to have been in an abusive relationship. Girls that are between the ages of 16 to 24 are 3 times as likely than any other demographic to be abused by a boyfriend or other intimate partner. According to the Federal Centers for Disease and Control and Prevention, more than a quarter of girls and 15% of boys experience some form of intimate partner violence, such as sexual assault, physical abuse, or stalking before the age of 18. Children and teens who experience dating violence or who are exposed to domestic violence at home are also at a higher risk for mental health problems. And due to their past trauma, they are more likely than any other young people to experience abusive relationships when they are adults. Also, intimate partner violence, known as IPV, has 3 different cycles. And their 3 phases are, number 1, the tension phase. This is when stress or emotions build up over a certain period of time. The abuser might pick fights, nitpick, or show aggression. Stage 2, acute or crisis phase. This is when episodes of IPV happen. The abuser will hurt and blame the victim. The victim will try to take actions to survive the abuse. Honeymoon phase. This is when the abuser becomes calmer and might try to apologize, ask for forgiveness, or promise the abuse will not happen again. And then these are some reasons that it can happen. Drug or alcohol are introduced. Teens are pressured into behaving in ways they ordinarily wouldn't by their peers. Teens are not mature enough to communicate their feelings to their romantic partners. Teens do not understand how to communicate effectively with their romantic partners. They view it in the media and think that it is normal to have unhealthy relationships. Teens are depressed or suffer from anxiety or other emotional problems. Conforming to masculine or feminine gender roles that reinforce unequal power and control between partners, and teens do not understand how to communicate effectively with their romantic partners. And then lastly, teens are not mature enough to communicate their feelings. Some symptoms of teen dating violence: depression, anxiety, aggression, alcoholism or drug abuse, anorexia or bulimia, abusive relationships as adults, thoughts of suicide, and sexually transmitted diseases. Teens who are in a violent or abusive relationships are also more likely to be in an unhealthy or abusive relationships later on in their life. Many domestic abusers report having been sexually, physically, or emotionally abused as a child or teenager. Approximately 20% of IPV survivors reported experiencing a new onset of psychiatric disorders such as major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, and post-traumatic stress disorder, and a wide range of substance use disorders. Survivors often internalize the verbal abuse from their partner. They may sometimes blame themselves for the situation. They can experience fear as well as anger and resentment towards themselves. Chronic abuse may result in compulsive and obsessive behaviors and lead to self-destruction or suicide. The most common physical symptoms include injuries, headaches, insomnia, chronic pain, choking sensations, hyperventilation, and gastrointestinal symptoms, chest, back, and pelvic pain. IPV can also result in unplanned pregnancies and pregnancy complications. And then next is how to try and prevent it. First, you want to try and tell somebody. You don't want to be afraid to talk to a friend, adult, family member, or someone you trust. There are people in organizations who can help you get out of a violent dating situation before it escalates. Next, document the abuse. Record what's taking place. Keep a journal of the violence you're experiencing, including dates and times of each incident. Seek medical care for any injuries. Print out emails, text messages, or any other form of electronic communication that contains evidence of dating violence. And then lastly, leave the relationship. Relationships can turn violent quickly. If this happens, get out of the immediate situation, consult friends or trusted adults for help before the abuse intensifies. You also want to have an open line of communication between parents, which allows teens to feel comfortable to come forward if and when something does happen. Making sure teens are aware of the importance of trust, honesty, and respect in a relationship. It can help lay the foundation for a healthy relationship. You want to be able to set healthy relationships at home. That way they can see a good example. Children typically learn how to develop relationships and emotional skills through their experience with their parents and their primary caregivers. When there is a disagreement or stress, you want to model how to handle the stressful situation and challenging emotions such as anger or sadness. For families and parents, you want to be able to know your teen's friends, their peers, and that way and their friendships, because they have a very strong influence on your children. Healthy friendships with people who are supportive, caring, and understanding can affect how your teen thinks about relationships and dating. Knowing your teen friends can help you understand your child better. Being able to learn the signs is important for us to help educate those around us. Listen to your teen and believe what they are saying. It is hard for most teens to talk about their dating experiences that involve partner violence. This is because they might not think no one will believe them. They may also feel scared, confused, or ashamed. Do not blame or judge your child. It's important for your child to feel supported. It is also important to keep an open line of communication between you and your child. You remind your teen that they deserve to be in a healthy relationship. Healthy relationships should never hurt. Healthy relationships feel supportive and be able to respect each other's boundaries. If your teen is experiencing intimate partner violence, decide on the next steps. Leaving an unhealthy relationship can be difficult. Your teen may also feel fearful. Talk with your teen's guidance counselor, principal, or teachers at school. If needed, talk with the police. Help your teen get support from your doctor or therapist. If you're not sure how to find a therapist, talk with your child's pediatrician. Get support for yourself. As a parent, learning that your child is experiencing IPV can be emotionally challenging. Getting support for yourself from someone you trust can help you better support your child. And then next, we're going to talk about how to assess for it. So there's two main tools that you can use to try to assess for it. One is the danger assessment, and the next is the stalking and harassment risk assessment risk profile, which is known as SHARP. And there's also some telling signs. A couple of telling signs is on and off again relationship, unexplained physical injuries, stress and mental health problems, spending large amounts of time online, low self-esteem, unhealthy beliefs about relationships, substance abuse problems, aggressive behaviors, isolation, separating from their friends and family, poor grades and performance in their school, especially when it's unexpected, and early sexual activity or having multiple sexual partners. So the free danger assessment is something that helps determine the level of danger an abused person has. The free danger assessment helps determine the level of danger that an abused person has of actually being killed from their intimate partner. There are two parts to the tool. Number one is a calendar, and number two is a 20-item scoring instrument. The calendar helps to assess the severity and frequency of the abuse. It helps to raise the consciousness of the victim and to help reduce the denial and the minimalization of the abuse. The 20-item scoring instrument uses a weighted system to score yes or no system response to risk factors associated with intimate partner homicide. It is available in multiple languages and offers a separate assessment tool. And a couple of the questions I included that are from the assessment is he or she constantly jealous and or possessive of you? Does he or she try to isolate you socially? Does he or she constantly blame you and or put you down? And then in the SHARP assessment, it is about a 15-minute online assessment that is free and also confidential. And then within about a minute of completing the assessment, participants receive a narrative summarizing their situation and steps that they may want to consider to improve their safety. SHARP is useful for both victims of stalking and professionals assisting these victims. It is consistent with general legal components of stalking statutes, and it was developed collaboratively with professionals in the field as well as victims, including attorneys, victim advocates, prosecutors, and law enforcement, and organizations such as Battered Women's Justice Project and the Stalking Resource Centers. And then next, we're gonna have Abby.
Okay, so first we're going to be looking at what makes a youth more at risk to be involved in dating violence. So just a disclaimer, not a lot of research has been done on youth that identify outside of the gender binary. So most of this information I will be providing is based on male and female hetero relationships. So the first risk is if they experience violence in their home or community, which includes substance use and aggressive behaviors like Sierra mentioned. Next is if they experience depression and specifically sadness and hopelessness. And if they have friends in violent dating relationships, this can also be predictive of their own potential involvement. Okay, so some additional risk factors for teens include experiencing stressful life events, including sexual abuse, coming from a low-income household or community, if they began dating at an early age, being exposed to harsh parenting or inconsistent discipline, if they participated in sexual activity prior to age 16, if they engage in substance use, and if they have lower self-esteem. And just to clarify, these are not actual causalities. They have just been found to be correlations. And then some risk factors for specifically perpetrators include having little to no relationship experience, being vulnerable to peer pressure, having unsophisticated communication styles, challenges managing anger or frustration, associating with violent peers, having low self-esteem and depression, and not having parental supervision and support. So the diagram on the left here illustrates some of the tactics used by abusers to assert their power and control. These examples do not happen to everyone, but they are actions that might be used over a period of time. And then the diagram on the right shows characteristics of a healthy relationship, which is centered around equality. So these diagrams can be used with the teen involved in dating violence to show them what a unhealthy relationship versus a relationship based on equality and what that looks like. Okay, so next I wanted to touch on how technology has impacted teen dating violence, because this is something that is integral to teens' lives and something that we need to be aware of as therapists. So, from a study done in 2013, it showed 26% of youth in a relationship said that they had experienced some form of cyber dating abuse in the prior year. So, with the use of social media, smartphones, and texting, abusers are able to harass a teen at any time, even when they are apart. So, abusers can use technology to track locations, stalk, cyberbully, make threats, maintain constant contact, isolate the teen, and share intimate media non consensually. And then, additionally, with access to dating apps, this can allow perpetrators to have access to more people. Technology can also provide support for survivors, including location sharing for safety, evidence gathering, and connecting with support systems. From a study done in 2008, less than 1 out of 10 victims of teen dating violence sought out help. So, going into this field, it's important that we are aware of the reasons behind why teens might stay in violent relationships and why it is difficult to seek out help. These are just some of the reasons that haven't already been mentioned that might not be super obvious. So, the first being that they fear what others will do when they find out and that other people won't understand their relationship. They might be afraid that their parents might get angry with them or blame them for the abuse. Therefore, they might lose privileges like going out with their friends or having their phone. Their partner has threatened to harm themselves, so they have guilt if they were to leave. They fear that no one else will date them if they break up. And specifically for LGBTQIA plus youth, they might have to out themselves in order to receive help, and that can have its own set of challenges. Um, their partner has threatened to spread rumors about them in order to make them stay. And the last one is if they feel shame about the abuse, so they want to keep it a secret. On this slide, we have some tools for working with both survivors and abusers. So when working with survivors, it is important to discuss the limits of confidentiality up front and when you are required to report. So if you're afraid that they won't confide in you, once they know about reporting, you can assist them in finding other people that they can talk to, such as confidential hotlines. Make a safety plan. Even if the teen says they aren't in serious danger, help them know what to do if things were to get violent. Let teens know that you are supportive regardless of if they leave the relationship or not. So their abuser could be isolating them from their support system. So if they know that you will stick around, they are more likely to seek out your help when they think about leaving. Ask teens how they feel. So saying things like, he doesn't love you, alienates the feelings of the teen. Be sensitive to cultural differences, see where they are coming from in terms of their culture and belief system when it comes to violence, sexuality, marriage, and male domination. Figure out what needs are being met in this relationship so we can help them figure out what those needs are, such as emotional, financial, or physical, and help them develop healthier ways of meeting those needs. Lastly, try not to get invested when a teen breaks up with their abuser. It's common for them to go back a number of times, and we want them to feel comfortable telling us if they end up getting back together. So we're continually a support for them. So moving to working with abusers and perpetrators, disclaimer is that is incredibly difficult, but these are just some tools. So support the teen for talking about the abuse and acknowledge that it takes courage to admit their problems and to seek help. Educate them about different types of abuse, the cycle of abuse, and the dynamics of power and control versus equality, and explore this teen's need for power and control over their partner. Be clear that violence is always a choice and happens because one person makes a choice to use force to gain power and control over another. When teens talk about anger, acknowledge that those feelings are okay, but being violent is not. Understand that anger is usually a defense against vulnerability to underlying feelings such as hurt or shame. And when an abuser says, we both abuse each other, Know that this is often an attempt to project blame onto their partner. And though both people might engage in violent behavior, there's usually one person ultimately controlling another while the other person fights to regain control. Explore where the teen learned to link violence with intimate relationships. And lastly, help the abuser develop empathy for their partner and reduce objectification. Okay, and now Carmen will be discussing some parent considerations.
Yes, thank you, Abby. So I will also be touching on some stuff that maybe Abby talked about earlier. So you might hear some stuff. So for parent considerations, what to be mindful if you're a parent. Some things to be mindful are theories of adolescent development. For example, knowing that autonomy is very important for adolescents. Low self-esteem has shown to be a factor of adolescent dating violence. And also be mindful to address empathetically your adolescent's thoughts and feelings to help them make their own decisions for their relationship. This suggests the theories of adolescent development and these things to be mindful suggest that parents should facilitate a balance between closeness with adolescents while also fostering independence so adolescents can grow confident on their own rather than diminish their self-esteem, right? Because now we know that low self-esteem has shown to be a factor for adolescent dating violence. So now if we go to the next slide. So now you might be wondering, what are some interventions that parents can take? So there's 3 interventions so far. One is open and healthy communication. The other is healthy messages and exploration about relationships, dating, violence, and intimacy. Parental leadership and support is another intervention. So for open and healthy communication for parents, researchers found that it was important for Latinx specifically to build open and trusting communication to be able to talk about adolescent dating violence and prevention. So this is just one group of community. However, research also shows that just having an open and healthy communication in general is very helpful with adolescents, particularly adolescents with dating violence. Some healthy messages and exploration. So some healthy messages parents can say about relationships is expressing their experiences or sharing their healthy experiences of relationships, their healthy, not only experiences, but also healthy partners and what a healthy partner looks like. Some exploration about what is a risky dating behavior. Some parents can share what they have experienced because every experience will be different. So just sharing that experience, what does a risky dating behavior look like, will give the adolescent or the child some insight as to what to look out for. So that is why that's one that research suggests to explore. Another one is explore the meaning of love. As we all know, love can mean different things and people can describe it differently. So exploring the meaning of love to your adolescent will help them explore their own meaning of love and what it should be. Also giving them the definition of dating abuse. And parents to share, like I said earlier, their personal experience of unhealthy and healthy dating relationships. So adolescents can dissect what is which if they ever come to find themselves in a situation where that comes. Now, for parental leadership and support, adolescents look for parental leadership and their support, and you can show this by reminders that their abuse is not their fault, and helping them make a distinction between guilt and responsibility. Without that leadership and support, research shows that it is very unlikely or hard for the individual who's experiencing dating violence to make a distinction between guilt and responsibility. So therefore, the parental leadership and support will help the adolescent make that distinction. And next slide. Now, so what is the importance of parent interventions? So the interventions that I mentioned earlier are very important for these reasons and more to come. So one is that the social norms that parents convey appear to influence levels of dating violence, so perpetration and perpetration. Parents' attitudes and behaviors are shown to affect adolescents' attitudes about dating violence, which can be linked to rates of dating violence incidents. Logically relate to how adolescents respond to a adolescent dating violent incident. So what I'm trying to say here is that with the interventions that I mentioned earlier, it will impact and influence the relationship that your adolescent or your child might think is healthy or unhealthy, because they already get stuff from the media. They think that that's what it looks like, that's what a relationship looks like. However, with your parent interventions, they'll know, okay, I'm going to make a distinction between that's what the social norms are at, but that's not what is healthy in real life. So that's why the parent interventions are important, so they can make a distinction between the social norms that are on TV and the ones that the parents convey, and to be mindful that we can also convey the norms. For example, if they see a abusive relationship at home, the adolescent will believe and think that that is something that is okay. And in addition to that, interventions with survivors of abuse or anyone who's at potential will help the individual or adolescent believe that they have the right to be safe and not harmed. So that is the ultimate importance of parent interventions, so that the survivor believes that they have a right to be safe and not harmed. And if we go to the next slide. So what are some inappropriate messages or actions from parents? Some that have shown to be inappropriate according to the study from 2018, Teens and Parents Perceived Levels of Helpfulness is excessive monitoring of your adolescent. 2, saying things like, if you keep seeing this person, I'll ground you for 2 weeks. 3rd, I don't approve of this kind of relationship. You're responsible for your actions. So these messages are inappropriate because studies have shown that excessive monitoring of your adolescent can lead to them engaging in risky behavior, or for them to have low self-esteem, which we already know from the beginning that having low self-esteem is, I want to say it correctly, so can be a factor for dating violence. And another thing I want to add to this is that another study by Chase from 2002 that is attached, found that only girls, not boys, decreased adolescent dating violence perpetration when parents monitor them. So this study only looked at heterosexual individuals. So that is why they said that they showed that only girls, not boys, decrease of the perpetration when they monitored them. And one last thing, emotional support is actually more effective than monitoring when you want to reduce the risk of adolescent dating violence. So having that emotional support, giving that emotional support to your adolescent is very, very crucial in preventing the risk of adolescent dating violence. And that concludes for me.
Hi there, I'm Corey, and I will be going over the cultural considerations section for this teen dating violence presentation. And I'll be highlighting specific groups within this section and talking about unique risk factors that put each group at risk for teen dating violence. So starting off, Firstly, I'll be going over the LGBTQ plus adolescents. Some things to keep in mind while working with this population is that they have statistically a greater risk of being exposed to dating violence compared to heterosexual couples. US probability samples indicate that compared to their heterosexual peers, sexual minority youth are twice as likely to experience psychological dating violence, 3 times more likely to experience physical dating violence, and up to 5 times more likely to experience sexual dating violence. LGBTQ plus youth increased risk for dating violence is not entirely understood. A researcher by the name of Wolf introduced a useful framework called the minority stress theory. This theory proposes that the interaction between minority status and majority values result in conflict and increased stress within a broader social context, which for sexual minorities may take in the form of self-stigmatization, overt and covert hostility, violence, expectations of rejection, and or actual rejection from primary social supports. As a result, this increases the burden of stressors and can be harmful towards the mental and physical health of these adolescents. With respect to dating violence, a minority stress framework suggests that LGBTQ plus youth are at an increased risk of dating violence, at least partly because of the multitude of stigma-related stressors they face. Because of their disadvantaged social status, they may be more likely than heterosexual youth to experience some common risk factors. For example, child abuse, parental rejection, social isolation, as well as some additional unique factors, which are such as history of discrimination due to their sexual orientation or gender identity, internalized homophobia, concealment of partnerships from unaccepting adults who might otherwise serve as protective resources. Next. Next, I'll be talking about the African American community and their risk factors. While doing research on one of the articles I found highlighted media and exposure to community violence significantly contributed to African American adolescents' likelihood to participate in dating violence. Specifically with media, surveys found that African American adolescents consume media at greater rates than any other ethnic community. The article argues that African American adolescents consume popular media in order to learn about relationships. Culturally targeted forms of media, such as hip hop medias, have also been accused of reinforcing messages that rely on stereotypical gender and racial frameworks, including Black women's hypersexuality, Black male promiscuity, male and female antagonism. Media channels often present adolescents with a portrait of intimacy as a game that relies upon false self-presentations, while reinforcing the idea that African-American male-female relationships center on sexual interactions. As a result, African-American youth receive unreliable information and false ideas as to what relationships look like. And as a result, they enter into unhealthy relationships. Media are silent sources of education, and they consume it and learn from watching it, such as twerking, guys going out and having lots of sex, and couples fighting are all examples of the stereotypes highlighted earlier. Kids will consume all of that and develop a false idea of what healthy relationships should look like. Moving on to exposure to community violence, reports of personal exposure to violence in familial contexts are higher in urban communities. Some violence exposure has consistently been found to increase adolescents' likelihood to perpetrate or experience violence in their dating relationships. One reason for this is that violence between neighbors, extended family members, parents, and other community members are adopted by adolescents through social learning and modeling. Although witnessing violence in one's family may be at first highly distressing, it can become normalized over time and shape personal perceptions of acceptable relationship behavior. In fact, African American adolescent girls exposed to violence between their parents are more likely to remain in it or move into violent relationships compared to those who have not been exposed. Children and adolescents are sponges, and they are constantly unconsciously absorbing everything in their environment, even outside of the context of relationships. Kids learn from what is happening around them, model what they've been exposed to. And when these kids grow up, they're highly likely to maintain that maladaptive behavior they learned as children until they begin to unlearn it. Next. The last group that I'll be addressing is the Hispanic community, specifically in the risk factors of gender roles. Adolescent dating violence has been associated with an acceptance of traditional gender stereotypes. Research on Hispanic culture and violence suggested that some aspects of Hispanic culture are associated with more acceptance or prevalence of violence. To explain these cultural disparities and attitudes towards violence, researchers often point to Marianismo and machismo beliefs, which are deferential to Latina gender roles. According to Marianismo beliefs, women are expected to embody passivity, submissiveness, humility, asexuality, and self-sacrifice for the family. Whereas machismo beliefs are characterized by physical prowess, aggression, toughness, being in charge, and risk-taking. Machismo beliefs give primacy to men's dominance, superiority, and strength in relationships. Moving on to acculturation. It is defined as the adaptation or preservation of particular cultural norms and practices after an immigration experience. The acculturation process for Hispanic adolescents involves the simultaneous processes of adapting to American culture while retaining values and beliefs from their familial nations and cultures of origin. Some research has found that Hispanic adolescents who have higher levels of acculturation into American systems are at greater risk of adolescent dating violence. However, other studies indicate that moderate levels of acculturation serve as protective factors against adolescent dating violence. This discrepancy may be partly due to the variability in measures used to assess acculturation, such as years in the United States, language spoken, and media source consumption, which limits researchers' abilities to accurately capture the true influence of this phenomenon. Although research in this inconsequential, it is still important to understand the significance of acculturation and their impact on Hispanic adolescents. Next. Last thing to consider when working with these specific populations within the LGBTQ category, they often face issues of disapproval and isolation based on their sexual identity. They may feel invisible or unwilling to open up and fear that of disapproval. Gay, lesbian teens often lack positive role models for healthy relationships due to their isolation, and most models are either traditional, gendered, or heteronormative. Gay, lesbian teens in abusive relationships reinforce what may already be low self-esteem or shame. Because of this, they may not trust anyone with the information of their abuse for fear of coming out or not being accepted for their lifestyle choices. And homophobia among adults, teachers, youth workers, parents, and other caring adults makes it difficult for gay, lesbian teens to report abuse. Moving on to African American adolescents. Domestic situations are seen as a family matter and should not be reported. Clients may be reluctant to share abuse or downplay it. Many African Americans handle conflicts by expressing anger. Although it is important to hear out that anger, and it is okay to be angry if the reasons for being that way are valid, but aggression should not be tolerated. They may refuse counseling because they feel that mental health professionals do not give them practical and realistic advice on dealing with the abuser. African American girls receive conflicting messages from society, factors such as racism, sexism, and classism. become which become major barriers for their attempts to develop a strong sense of self and avoid abusive relationships. They feel that they have no other option than to be with someone who is abusive. And they feel grateful to be with someone who is less abusive instead of not abusive at all. It's important to be aware of those challenges and assist clients by uplifting them and overcoming those sorts of barriers. With the Hispanic community, teenage dating violence is often forbidden, and there's possibility of dating in secret in some cases when somebody comes into your office. Latina females are taught to be very submissive and subservient and take care of the home and be faithful to their partners and not focus on their careers. This type of role in a relationship will most often keep a young girl from reporting any abuse against her. She may possibly even view the abuse as being her fault. Latino males usually control the household, and they're taught to work, be very macho, and pampered by their spouses. A Latino male who is an abuser may feel that abuse against his partner is evidence of maintaining his machismo or macho behavior. It can be seen as a way to prove who he is and that he's in charge. And something to keep in mind when hearing about somebody being in a toxic relationship. Our initial reaction is to want to push them out and get them out of the relationship and say that they're too good for them. And that is one way to approach this sort of issue. But I feel that it is better to present the client with the facts of the relationship and provide them the strength to be able to get out of that relationship on their own. Like with the teach a man a fish analogy. Give a man a fish, feed him for a day. If you teach a man to fish, feed him for a lifetime. Clients need to gain the strength to understand what a healthy relationships look like and to know what they deserve and to end an unhealthy relationship on their own. It's not about what we believe is best for them. It's about helping them realize what they believe is best for themselves. Overall, it's important to educate yourself on what dating means to different cultures before working with clients who differ from you. Next.
Okay, so I have a self-esteem intervention, and it's targeted for high school students and or older. The materials that are needed is you can use a piece of paper, an index card, and you're going to need a writing utensil, maybe your favorite pencil or your favorite pen. And the instructions are it's a two-part activity. So on one side is you're going to be writing the things I like about me activity. So you're going to begin by making a list of all the things that you currently like about yourself. And you generally want to take about 5 minutes, no more than 8. And then on the back of it is going to be part 2 activity. And then it is called How Will I Improve Myself from Here on Out? And then so basically on the same piece of paper or index card, you're going to turn it around and you begin a list of things that you would like to improve about yourself. And then on basically with this activity, it's kind of gonna give the student or adult a perspective outlook that everyone has room to grow. And then if you're doing it in a school setting, you can kind of break up into little groups, and then everyone can kind of share with each other about what they have on their cards. And that way, some of the students are going to have the same kind of stuff they want to improve on. And that way, not everyone's going to feel left out, because everyone is human and everyone has room to grow and improve. And then on that one, I would say like maybe have them do 10 minutes. So the whole activity should be no more than 20 minutes. Next.
Yeah, I'll be going over the Love is Intervention. It's specifically directed for middle school students and up. Materials needed would be a blank piece of paper, markers, and scissors. And the instructions for the activity itself is to cut a piece of paper into a giant heart large enough to write numerous words inside. Invite participants to write a few words that they believe love is in the heart. to discuss in groups in the words that they came up with. And at the end of the activity, discuss what love is and what love isn't. The point of this activity is to write a few words about what love is to them in the giant paper heart. And by the end of the activity, you will see all these things that what love is for people, and they will realize what that at no point is abuse or aggression is what love is. By sharing with others what love is to them, other participants may resonate with something someone else shared and help them find the words to further understand what love means to them. This is a great activity that doesn't need a lot of space and can be set up quickly and easily, that it is great for almost any age group. The style of teaching used in this activity doesn't negatively reinforce the bad behaviors by talking about bad things to do. Instead, you are positively reinforcing the good things we know that are healthy and safe. Next.
Okay, so this is just a relationship assessment intervention. So this can work for middle school students and up. You can either use printouts of this specific worksheet or have them have a lined sheet of paper with a writing utensil. Or I think you can also just have a conversation regarding some of these questions, including, the category of school, like, does this person encourage me to do well in school? Have my grades improved? So this is getting them to assess and think about all of these areas of their life and how this person is affecting them. So basically, you just state that the purpose is to look at what kind of impact our relationships are having on the rest of our lives, and pick someone and have them fill it out or answer the questions themselves. Also, I think this activity could be good alternatively for looking at the relationship with a parent or a sibling. So this could be used in addition to romantic relationships.
So this is my intervention, and it's called a boundary intervention. So the purpose of the boundary intervention is to start off with the title, and it is called What Are My Personal Boundaries? The age group is for adolescents and above. The activity, you will write the following title: My boundaries look like, and then you're going to write numbers 1 through 5 for now, and then later on you can add more whenever you come up with more. And the materials is your favorite writing tool, a poster or your personal notebook, and then tape. So then you can tape these personal boundaries somewhere, or you can just look in your notebook whenever you write a personal boundary. So the purpose for this intervention is that every relationship has its own norms, rules, and limits, correct? So therefore, each relationship will have its different boundaries. So with creating your own boundary statement, you will discover what are your individual boundaries, who do you need more boundaries with, and also you're going to be able to practice saying your own boundaries and use them in different relationships. The only shortcoming of this intervention is that every cultural group will have a different definition of what a boundary is. So it's best to get to know their cultural background, what they believe is a boundary, because just like Corey explained, Latinx groups, for example, they are, if I'm not sure if that's the correct word to use, but Latinx are raised with knowing to be submissive, right? And for the male to be machista. So for that culture group, for example, it's going to be hard to be aware of what a boundary is if their whole life they were raised with knowing submissiveness, right? So it is very important to acknowledge everybody's cultural background, that this might take some time for them to understand their own boundaries because of their cultural beliefs and values, correct? So some questions to help them think about boundary statements is, who do you struggle with to set healthy boundaries? Or who do I need to be establishing clear boundaries with? And how do I communicate boundaries to other people? So if you're having trouble with writing statements, those 3 questions can help can help our audience or adolescents be able to slowly come up with their own boundaries. Yes, this is my intervention. Thank you.
All right, and this is my community resource I found, and it's available. You can call and text or chat online with the advocates, and there's the phone number, and you can text them, and their cost is free. And then 1 second. And they have trained advocates that are available 24/7 to offer support, education, and advocate to teens and young adults, as well as friends and or family with questions or concerns about the individual who is dating or who is in the relationship. So I thought that was neat because it's not only for the person or the survivor, but it's also for people that are in the network with the survivor. They also offer information about relationship abuse for educators, counselors, and service providers, which focus on teens and young adults. And they connect you to resources nearby and help you plan for a safer relationship, or they are just also there to help listen to you and your concerns.
Okay, so A Safe Place in Oakland is a free space that provides a 24-hour hotline along with teen dating violence information, teen events centered around positive relationships, and counseling services. And this is a free program.
Hi, this is the community resource that I found. It was the Community Overcoming Relationship Abuse, otherwise known as CORA. CORA is the only agency in San Mateo County solely dedicated to helping those affected by intimate partner abuse. From counseling to emergency housing to legal assistance, their services are designed to provide safety and support in healing. CORA's values and vision recognize the connection between social and institutional oppression, including sexism, racism, and heterosexism, and violence, including intimate partner abuse and the fact that intimate partner abuse results from and is perpetrated by societal beliefs and norms. Our broad spectrum of services addresses the intergenerational nature of violence and their goal of creating a community where intimate partners treat one another with mutual respect, compassion, and integrity.
So the community resource that I found was Genesis Women's Shelter and Support. So the cost is free. The website is linked in that slide. And they have their main office, which their number is there. And they also schedule counseling sessions. They have emergency shelter for up to 6 weeks. And it's for women and their children. In addition to that, they do safety planning and they provide legal help. And if you need shelter, or if you're in need of shelter, you can call or text their 24-hour hotline. And all the services are free and confidential. And they do have Spanish language services available at some locations. And they do not display the location of their shelter because of safety reasons. So if you did want their location, you would have to call and get that information. And each person staying at their shelter attends weekly individual and group therapy for the duration of their stay. And for their children, they can attend school that is called Simmons School, that is directly associated with the Genesis Women's Shelter. So those are some things that come with Genesis Women's Shelter.
And we're done.